Ed, and she's going to tell us a few of their talents and their many contributions that they gave to the town as well as to Carteret County. Now, Mary Frazier, the first thing I want you to start off with, we'll do a little genealogy first. We'll talk about your dad's mom and dad. Who were they and where were they from?
All right. Well, they were from Davis's Shore, as Daddy called it, Davis's Shore, instead of just Davis Shore. And my grandfather was Luther Paul, and he married Lina Willis. Now, of course, Luther Paul, as everybody knows, was a great inventor, and anything he wanted, he'd make it.
Right.
He'd read the plans for it. For instance, Lina had played the organ in the church. And so when they got married, she wanted to have an organ. So Granddaddy just sent away for the plans, read them, and built her an organ that played perfectly. And also, when the children came along, Daddy and his 5 brothers and sisters, there were 6 in the family.
Okay, would you name those?
Okay, Iva was the oldest, and then Daddy, Graydon, was the next. And then Daphne Paul, and then I think Glennie was next, Glennie, and then Raymond was the youngest. Halsey.
Yeah, I was going to say, how
Yeah,
about your Uncle Halsey?
I'm trying to think where Halsey came in there.
Okay.
I think Halsey, I think, was a year or a year and a half older than Daphne, so he came between Daddy and Daphne.
Okay, all right.
Well, they were all musical. They got it from both sides because Granddaddy, I think he played the violin, maybe a zither, and of course Lina played the organ and the piano. And Granddaddy had a projector and films, and he made a boat that you could propel by like a bicycle. So the family, Daddy and the children, would go around to the little communities down east, Marshallburg and all those places, once a week, and they'd take the film and projector, and then they'd show movies to the people.
So that's how they got the movies in those communities.
Right. And of course that was a kind of new thing then, because this is between 1900 and 1912. And of course Granddaddy also at that time had built his own little helicopter, and he could get it to go up off the ground a certain number of feet, I don't know, and Grandmother didn't like it, and she said, Luther, she said, that's dangerous. She said, I don't want you doing that anymore, so he put it away. But he actually built that, I believe, before the Wright brothers even built their plane.
Now, do we have that at the museum?
Yes.
Okay, at the Maritime Museum in Beaufort.
Well, I think, well, maybe that's in the museum, but I think in the historical, building, the Safert building.
The Safert building, okay.
There are pictures.
Yes.
And my brother, Graydon, built a model of the Bumblebee, the plane.
Okay.
There's a history of that over there.
Okay.
At any rate, they were a musical family, and they would play, and later when they came to Beaufort, I think Daddy came in 1912, when he was, or 1911, when he was 11 or 12 years old, and Granddaddy had the picture show. The only one, I think, in the county, certainly at that time.
And the location and the name?
Was the Sea Breeze Theater, and it was right there on Front Street, and it was across the street from Granddaddy's. He had a machine shop then.
And it's right where Bell's drugstore is now, right?
Well,
or the parking lot.
Well, it's where the, let's see, the museum. It's where the museum
Okay,
is,
so
right next to where the museum is.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of Bell's, that right in that area.
Between Bell's drugstore and the museum.
Right.
I remember working there. I sold tickets there. Okay.
So, and for the silent movies, of course, they didn't have the music or the talking. So Daphne would be there with the piano, and Daddy with the drums, and the exciting part, she'd go, on the piano, and Daddy'd beat the drums, and they'd be watching the film, you see, and play accordingly. So as I say, they were musical, and Mother's family also was musical.
Okay, we're going to talk about your mom, and I want you to tell me her name and where she came from.
Okay.
How she got to Beaufort.
Right. Well, she was Mary Clark Wilhelm, and she was born in Fort Myers, Florida. And she came from a very musical family. Her grandfather was a violinist, and Mother really was a child prodigy. When she was 5 years old, she hadn't taken piano yet, but she could play anything if she heard it. So she played for Sunday school in the Sunbeam Band when she was 5 years old.
Gracious.
The Sunbeams.
Got an early start.
She really did. But just, I think, you're born with that. Maybe from another life, who knows.
Yes.
At any rate, she studied, and by the time she was 12 years old, she was really an accomplished musician, and she would accompany her grandfather. She'd play the piano and he'd play the violin, these difficult pieces. And when she said she wanted to be outdoors playing, but she'd have to be in there accompanying her grandfather. And it was just understood in that household that anyone with any culture at all had a piano, and everybody played some kind of musical instrument. Mother was talented in many ways. She studied what was called elocution in those days, speaking dramatically. And she was so good at it that every year she won the prize, which was a silver medal. And every year she'd win. So finally, by the time she was a senior in high school, they asked her if she would please not participate because they wanted somebody else to win.
I thought you were going to say they were going to ask her to turn them all back in.
No, just wanted to give somebody else a chance to win.
Right.
So then she went, after she graduated from high school, she went for 1 year to what was called normal college, and she got a kind of a degree that they could get then in 1 year. And she taught school when she was only 18. And the way that she got to Beaufort was that her brother-in-law, the man that her sister married, was a Baptist minister. And he was called to Beaufort, in the Beaufort Baptist Church, and I believe it was 1922, or 1921 maybe, because Mother and Daddy got married in 21. Maybe even 20, probably 1920. And so Mother came to visit her sister and her brother-in-law. And of course she went to choir practice and to church, and there was this good-looking young man there, and he was singing in the choir, and then they had Mother playing the piano. And so he asked her, if he could walk her home after choir practice, and so she said yes, and they started kind of going out. Well, one time they were rehearsing some scene for something in the church, and Daddy was practicing with this very attractive young lady, and Mother got so angry that she banged the piano lid down and rushed out, and they didn't have an accompanist.
Oh my goodness.
And then another time, Mother had, a lot of boyfriends that would ask her out, and one of them was Elliot Yule. And both he and Daddy were trying to date Mother. And they got together one time and bought a box of candy together and gave her that box of candy, and she was so angry she wouldn't speak to either one of them for a week. She thought that was pretty cheap. Then another time, Mother had a date with Elliot Yule, and they were sitting on the porch. And Daddy got to thinking about that, and he got so angry he came over there and he chased Elliot Yule off the porch and over the fence, and then he had the date.
They really showed their feelings for each other,
Yeah,
didn't they?
they really did. And then, of course, when they got married, they were both musical and they entertained. They went back to Florida, went to Paso Grill, and Daddy had a railways down there. And they would entertain at the hotels and the various places around there. There was another lady that played the violin and Mother the piano, and then they sang. And of course they'd get paid for this. And by the time Graydon and Harry came along, my two brothers, They were just babies. They'd put them in the back seat of the car. They'd drive to the hotel and lock the car, leave them something to play with, and then go in and perform because I guess they couldn't afford a babysitter.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, that was
that's-
okay in those days. It was
Oh
safer
yes,
to do
yes,
that.
they're right. There was nothing.
But that was the
dangerous about it.
beginning of their vaudeville days, you might say.
Right, yeah, where they.
They're entertaining.
And Mother's father had an opera house. He did a lot of things. He was quite an interesting fellow too. This was John Wilhelm, her father,
Mm-hmm.
and her mother was Emily Frazier Scott, and I'm named for my grandmother and my mother. She combined the Mary and Frazier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Emily Frazier Scott, Mother's mother, was a wonderful musician too. And her father, as well as the grandfather, also played the violin. And the way Mother's parents met was at a dance. And in those days, you know, they had a dance card where all the different men would fill in and they'd dance with the person on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he filled out all of her dance card, and they were both marvelous dancers. And they were known throughout Pinellas County after a while for being such wonderful dancers. And of course, they eventually got married.
Mm-hmm.
But Mother's own mother died very young. She was only 28 and died when Mother was 3 years old.
Mm.
But there again, she got the musical inheritance from the parents the same way that Daddy did from his parents. So it was inevitable.
You put the two together.
Yeah,
right.
that you had a musical.
A team, you sure did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I say, Mother had taught school, and then after she and Daddy got married in the 30s, after they came back to Beaufort.
That's what I was going to ask you. When did they come to Beaufort
All right.
from Florida?
They came back, I think, in 1925 or 1926.
Okay.
For two reasons. One, there was a terrible hurricane, and they lost everything in the hurricane because they were right on the water. And two, then we're starting to have the stock market crash, which I think was in 28.
Okay, the Depression was beginning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they lost everything, so then they needed to come back to Beaufort, where Granddaddy had a business and Daddy could help in the business.
Mm-hmm.
But before, I keep backing up, before they got married, Daddy graduated from Winterville High School when he was 16. Of course, he was president of the class. And then he went to Wake Forest College. And he was in, I guess, what's similar to ROTC, training for the First World War. So then Mother and Daddy got married in 1921. We're in Florida. Then they came back to Beaufort, I think about 25, 26, somewhere around there. And Mother, once again, taught school. She taught the 6th grade, and I believe that Medora Guthrie was one of her students.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's in the Beaufort Elementary School? Okay.
The 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we just had that one school, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a combined school, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But they, there was no money, you know, so they paid the teachers with what they call script, just a piece of paper, and you really, you know, they never really.
How could you live off of that script?
Right, yeah. They had a hard time.
You just got
maybe,
recognition.
Yeah, and maybe they could get some groceries with it, but it wasn't very much.
Okay, okay.
And then, of course, they, after that, for the most part, they stayed in Beaufort. We lived, well, I don't remember it, I was just a baby, on Front Street, and there was a little house that sat way back next to the Duncan house on the very end of Front Street.
Okay, on this side of the post office.
Well,
that
no,
Duncan
no,
house?
all the way down to the end of Front Street.
Oh,
the east
okay,
end.
okay. All
That-
right,
that
Judge
big,
Duncan's
long
house.
Duncan, yeah.
Okay, the turntable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there was a long vacant lot and a little house that sat back, and they lived there when I was a baby. And then I forgot where they lived next, but then we also lived, it's behind where Tommy, what's that big house that sits right on the front?
Whereabouts on the front?
Down from where the Bell house is, down from the old Jones house. Tommy Davis.
Okay.
Mrs. Davis. Well, that house wasn't
next
there then.
is on the same block of Miss Leslie Arrington's house?
Yes.
Where Julian lives now?
Right.
That same block. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But that house wasn't there then. There was another little house that sat way back, and then that's where we lived, and that was next to Neva Bell, Mr. Roland Bell.
Yes.
They lived there.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about now. Okay.
And then in, I think, 1936, we moved to the house on Front Street, which was next to the picture show.
And which would be located now on the other side of the museum.
Right. And we lived
Is that
there.
the one that Alan Woolard lives in?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
We lived there until 1947, and Dr. Woodard bought the house then.
Right.
And for 1 year, then we went back to Florida. But I was so unhappy, I wanted to come back to Beaufort, and I think Daddy did too. So in the meantime, he'd come back and he built this house. And so then we came back.
Which is 1706
Front Street.
Right
The
on
little
the
yellow
water.
house on the water.
On the water.
Says Happy Landing on the oar.
Right.
On the front door.
Right. Okay, and in the meantime now, when your dad came back in 47, okay, when he came back, did they start entertaining again around this area?
Oh yeah, they always did that.
Always entertaining.
Yeah.
Church socials?
Yes.
Women's club socials,
Yeah.
whatever the functions were, fundraisers.
Right. Yeah, they always did that.
Okay.
But during the war, Daddy was mayor of Beaufort.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about his political life.
Well, he
public
wasn't
official life.
Well, he wasn't really a political person. I mean, he was too honest.
Yes.
But he was elected mayor during the war, and he was the head of civilian defense. And, you know, during the war, there were German submarines right off this coast.
Right.
A lot of people may not have known that. And they had blackouts. All the windows had to be covered, you know, so no light could be showing. And one of those submarines was torpedoed, and they got the prisoners, and they brought them in, and they put them in the Morehead City jail.
German prisoners.
Oh, there were exciting times, you know. And there was supposed to be a spy in town that they were trying to catch.
Right.
But Daddy, as I said, he was so honest that he just couldn't be in politics, you know, to be swayed by this faction or that.
Right.
And of course, he was a very religious person. He didn't try to push it off on anybody, but he
lived it himself.
He lived it himself. He was a true Christian man.
He and your mom both.
He and Mother both.
Yes.
So he went to prayer meeting on Wednesday nights, and he told them, before they had a meeting, he said, I go to prayer meeting on Wednesday night. We can have a meeting on Tuesday or Thursday or any other day you want. He said, but we're not going to have it on Wednesday night because I'm going to prayer meeting.
I'll be in church.
Yeah, and there were a couple of people were grumbling about that, but they went along with it. Well, one man, he just kind of resented this. And so one time Daddy was talking, and he said, you think there's nothing wrong with anybody. He said, you just tell me what's right with the devil. And Daddy said, well, he minds his own business. he didn't get any more comments from that man. He was always good with a comeback. A heckler better not say anything or he could go in one better.
He always had an answer.
Yeah, and of course, Mother and Daddy both were leaders in the church. Both of them taught Sunday school for 50 years. And Daddy was superintendent of the Sunday school for so many years, and he'd lead the singing, you know, standing up in front of the church.
And your mom played the piano
and Mother
or the
played
organ.
the piano, and she played the organ. And she directed the choir. Trying to think of any more things about the church.
Well, I think you covered it all when you said they were leaders, because they were leaders in every aspect of church activities. Completely.
Yeah. Yes, they were.
If you come along through the years a little bit now, after, well, I'd say in the late 50s, your dad was one of the instigators of
Beaufort Historical Association.
Yeah, and the our 200 and what anniversary? He was. I know he was involved in that.
Yeah, and so
was it
Mother.
249, 250, 250th?
Yeah.
We're trying to celebrate the 250th, I think, but we got it a little late, maybe a year late or something. I remember.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and Mother was wonderful at directing programs and pageants.
And she wrote plays?
Yes. I think it was 1942, she wrote a play, Unknown Seas.
Yes.
It was about Nancy Manning and Dr. French, a love story.
Yes.
It was a wonderful play, wonderful dialogue. It's a shame that, you know, it couldn't have been produced somewhere else. But it was given a couple of times here.
And she wrote music and songs?
Yes, she had the definite ability to write. And that's why when they did their old book, Folklore, Facts, and Fiction, they were a good team, because Daddy could tell the stories, but Mother could write them.
Right, right. He was a great storyteller.
He was a great storyteller, but he said he didn't want to hear anything about any more dangling modifiers. Because Mother was going to have it exactly correct, which she did.
Right. School teacher in her.
Right. But they both had, and Daddy wrote beautiful poetry with such feeling. My favorite, of course, was The Fisherman, but Daddy's favorite was My View from Taylor's Creek. And
do you remember either one of those?
Well, I could read it to you, but I don't think I can do it.
Okay.
It makes me too sad.
Okay, all right, that's fine. We know it's in the book.
Right.
Okay, and hold the front of that book up for me just a moment, because this is the one that was a bestseller when he was conductor of the bus tour, the Old English bus for the Historical Association. And I know that when he got through with his storytelling on that bus tour, that these books were available, and we couldn't keep them at the restoration. I mean, they would move faster than what we could order.
Yeah, because of course it was his personality.
Yes.
That sold it.
Yes.
And his stories.
But the writings were so great that the people enjoyed them. And he had told some of the stories that were in the book that he had written. He would tell a little bit about them on the bus tour, and that would make the people want to buy them that much quicker.
Right.
Yes. Did they write any other books besides that one?
No.
That's the main book.
Like I say, Daddy did write poems, and Mother wrote the play, but that was the only book that they collaborated on.
Yeah, okay.
Mother was working on a book, but I don't know whatever happened to that. She wouldn't let me read it.
Okay, now tell us about him getting involved with the both of them getting involved with the Historical Association, and how they more or less got involved in the beginning and worked their way on through and was a volunteer throughout their life.
Yeah, well, I don't know, I think they just decided that we needed something like that to preserve the historical folklore and the tales and everything about Beaufort and Carteret County. So they organized, along with others, the Beaufort Historical Association, I think about 1960.
That's
wasn't
right.
it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been going strong and getting stronger ever since.
More
And of course
tourists
that
are
was-
finding out about it all the time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But they always look forward to coming to take the bus tour.
Yes, yeah, that was always something on the list
That was
they wanted
special.
to do. And, you know, Daddy, I guess you could say, he was kind of a diamond in the rough Renaissance man, because he was always open to new ideas. You know, some people get set in their ways and they don't want change, but not Daddy. If he thought anything was innovative, that would be better, he was always open to that. And of course, I said he was an honest man. You could believe anything he said. But when he tells some of his tales, he's been known to exaggerate just a tad.
That makes the story better.
Right. Yeah, that's what makes a tall tale
Yes.
better. And of course, some of those tales had to do with Decatur Gillikin, who was supposedly the strongest man that had ever been in Carteret County. Now, they told so many tales about him, it's kind of hard to believe, but Daddy vows they were true.
He almost swears by them.
Right. And in those days, they used to have boxing matches, and people from another county or another town would come and challenge the champion. And, you know, they'd place bets on this. Well, nobody had ever beaten Decatur Gillikin. And this fellow from Newbern, I think his name was Knockout Smith, decided that he was going to come down to Otway, which is where Decatur lived, and challenge him to a duel in the boxing ring. So he left Newbern and he walked. And it was days and days and days, and finally he got to Otway. And he walked up to this house where he'd been told that Decatur lived. And there was a young girl there, young woman. And he said, "Is this the home of Decatur Gillikin?" And she said, "Yes, it is." She said, He's down talking to somebody. He'll be back in just a little while. Why don't you sit down and rest?" And he said, "Well, you know," he said, I'm mighty hot and thirsty. I've been walking all this way." And she said, "Oh, well, let me get you some water." He said, "That'll be fine." So she walked over, and there's this great big barrel, you know, 50 or 75-pound keg. And she just reached over, and she got a cup, picked that barrel up over her shoulder, held it, and poured a cup of water. Put it back down, and she walked over and handed, she said, "Here's your drink, mister." He said, "You say you're Decatur's daughter?" She said, "That's right." He said, "I'm going back to Newbern." He turned around and left.
Decatur. He didn't want to meet Decatur if that was his daughter.
Right. And now Decatur, since I guess he was such a big, strong guy, I guess he thought he didn't have to pay his taxes. Well, the mayor in Beaufort and some of the aldermen decided that they were going to do something about that. And Decatur used to come once a month from Otway to get his supplies. And he'd come in that dead rise Sharpie, sailing up Taylor's Creek, and he'd come right up to the Atlantic Hotel, which was downtown, about where, somewhere around the Inlet Inn there. And he tied up that boat, and walked down the wharf, and he went in to Ramsey's grocery store to get his monthly supplies. Well, when he went inside, the mayor and some of his cohort said, "We're going to get that boat and do something about these taxes." So they went down there and they untied her and they got it up on the shore, and they got 6 men on one side and 6 on the other, and they hoisted that boat up over the breakwater. Then they carried it all the way down to the hummock house. There was a green knoll there, and they plopped that boat right down on it. And then they walked back over to the side of the store, and they were kind of laughing behind their hands. And pretty soon Decatur came out, and he'd gotten his groceries. Well, he looked around down there, he didn't see his boat. he saw them kind of looking off in the distance, so he looked over and he saw his boat all the way down there. He walked down there. He put that painter over his arm and he started walking. And he was pulling that boat just like it was a sack of oysters. He pulled it all the way back to the front of the store and he came out. And he had a 50-pound sack of sugar, put that in there. He had a 50-pound sack of flour, put that in there. And he had a keg of pennyweight nails, put that in there. And he had, maybe 5 or 6 board feet of timber. And he loaded those in there and his other sundry groceries. And I mean, he loaded her from stem to stern right up to the gunnels. And he left just one little space in the back for himself to get in. Well, these fellas, they were all there just looking and laughing. He didn't pay him a bit of attention, put that painter over his shoulder, and he started walking. And this time, it looked like he was pulling an empty gunny sack behind him. He got down to the breakwater. He picked up that boat, put it down on the shore and shoved it out in the water, went out about knee-deep, got in his boat, hoisted his jerry-rigged sail, and he turned and he went right down Taylor's Creek on back to Otway. Well, those shallow watermen, they were mummick some. So that was Decatur Gillikin, and there are many other stories that were told about him.
Well, that certainly shows that he was one of the strongest men.
Right. And then there was another fella who used to bring in he'd take part. He knew every shoal and every fishing spot there was around. So, and I don't know whether that was, I can't remember his name, whether it was Sammy's Guthrie, maybe, or, I don't know, did Telford Lewis ever do that?
Telford Willis.
Telford Willis,
Yeah. I think he was a hunter more than anything else.
Well, okay.
Might have been
I can't remember
Sammy's.
the name of this fellow, but whoever he was well known. So he took the crew out, tourists that had come down, and they hadn't been out a half an hour when they ran aground. And this tourist said to him, "I thought you said you knew every shoal there was." He said, "I do. That was the first one." So we had a lot of characters in this area, according to Daddy.
Oh yes, yes, many that he told stories on. Yes.
Right.
Well, up into, let's see, working with the Historical Association and volunteering his time and all, what did he do besides the narrator on the bus tour? Storytelling?
Well, yeah, storytelling and performing for
Sitting on the grounds, though.
Yeah, sitting on the grounds, and one of the sweetest things. After a bus tour, I was here in town, and Daddy got off the bus, and there were little children on that tour, and they were all gathered around him, and they were walking down the street, and he was holding the hand of one on each side, and they were just staring up at him like they'd never seen
Sort of like Pied Piper.
Yeah, it was the sweetest thing. I wish I'd had a picture of that. He could fascinate it if it were a little child or somebody 90 years old.
Didn't matter.
They're right. They were all fascinated by Daddy.
But I remember a little bit about him sitting on the grounds in his chair and the little children gathering around and sitting at his feet and him telling some of these tales, these stories.
Right.
That's a picture that I remember of him, besides being on the bus and stopping at these historic houses and telling the family stories, you know, of the houses.
Yes, he knew everything.
He knew all the families that lived in those houses,
Right.
and one of the most, I think, the funniest story that he told on one of his bus tours was down on Front Street when he said he was a little boy, I think, and it was one of the houses that he asked the gentleman that owned the house about tidal waves. He said, "Well, what do you do here on Front Street if you'd have a tidal wave? I mean, where would you go and what would you do about your house?" And he said the man says, oh, we'd open the front door and we'd open the back door and we just let it wash on in and wash out the back door. And the way he told it, see, I can't tell a story, but the way he told it, it was about a 5-minute story, but it was so interesting and so funny, you know, that it just held your attention while he was describing that house and that gentleman and the way that tidal wave would rush right in through that house and go on out the back door.
Right. Yeah,
He just had a way with it.
He did.
Such a natural
He
talent.
could tell a story. And he performed for all kinds of groups. He and Mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mother would play the piano, and Daddy would sing his songs, and then he'd tell some of the stories. So they were always a team. They performed at all the schools. They were on television. They were on radio. Any groups that came to town, special groups for the Rotarians, the VFW, just everybody wanted them to entertain.
When the VFW would have their loyal night, they called it, they would invite them to come out and entertain they would be the special guests that would entertain for their loyal night supper. Yeah, I remember that too. And their church Sunday school classes, when they'd have their Christmas parties, then Mr. and Mrs. Paul had to be the entertainer at that Christmas party.
Oh yeah, they always wanted them.
So they were always entertaining.
Yeah, that was just an essential part of their life, and they
Right.
were both so interested in preserving the history of the area.
Right. Not only the historic houses and the characters, but the stories that went, just like Decatur Gillikin and these type of stories.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure that they were heard on through generation.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of the things that Daddy knew and the songs that he knew, he had learned from his mother, and she had learned from her mother.
Mm-hmm. They had been passed down through
just
generations.
passed down through the generations. And he, of course, was known for certain songs that he sang around here. The Ship That Never Returned.
Yes.
And the Whaling Song and Two Little Girls in Blue.
Right.
And of course they did so many songs from shows that they ran, a lot of cute and funny songs. But the ones that are best known are the ones that he did for this area.
Well, you have some talent of your own, and so I'm wondering if maybe we could ask you if you would sing a few of those songs. That I know you learned them from your dad and your mom, so
right.
If you could sing a few of them for us.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay, you pick out the ones that you know that was his favorites that he used to sing in this area, about this area.
All right, well, one of them was the Whaling Song.
Mm-hmm.
The bosun on the mast so high, with a spyglass in his hand. There's a whale, there's a whale, there's a whalefish, he cried. There she blows off the larboard stand, brave boys. There she blows off the larboard stand. The captain on the quarter deck, such a brave young man was he. Overhaul, overhaul, let your davit take a fall, and lower your boats at sea, brave boys, and lower your boats at sea. The boats being lowered and the crew got in, the whale disappeared from view. Resolute, resolute to the whole boat's crew, and steer where the whalefish blew, brave boys, and steer where the whalefish blew. The whale being struck and the line played out, the fish gave a blow with his tail. He capsized the boat and they lost 6 men, but neither did you kill that whale, brave boys, but neither did you kill that whale. Oh, Greenland is an icy place, there's never grass nor green, where ice and snow are always there, and daylight seldom seen, brave boys, and daylight seldom seen. Of course, at the turn of the century, there was whaling, you know, off Cape Lookout, and Diamond City.
Wade Shore.
Right.
Yeah, it was a whaling industry.
It was a whaling industry, and of course the story of the Chrissy Wright that ran aground, and the men that froze. It was so cold that time, and the people on the shore couldn't get to them. They couldn't get through the seas, and they just had to stand there on the shore and watch the men die.
And
that's depicted in the post office.
Yes, and also it's the saying with the local people now, it's colder than the day that Chrissy Wright ran
ashore.
That's right. That whaling song is so fitting, though, for that area and that whaling time.
Yes, it is. And, of course, in those days, they did it to make a living.
Yes.
Now, they're going to have to do something to protect the whales because, you know, they're just killing so many of them. The whales don't have a chance.
Right.
But in those days, it was a matter of existing by killing the whales.
That's right. Now sing us another one.
Well, another song that everybody always liked and that was typical was The Ship That Never Returned.
Yes, yes.
On one summer day when the waves were rippling with a cool, soft, gentle breeze, did a ship set sail with her cargo laden for a port beyond the seas. Did she ever return? Oh no, she never returned, and her fate is yet unlearned. So for years and years there were loved ones watching for the ship that never returned. Only one more trip, said the gallant captain as he kissed his weeping wife. Only one more bag of this golden treasure, and to last us all through life. Did she ever return? Oh no, she never returned, and her fate is yet unlearned. And for years and years there've been loved ones watching for the ship that never returned.
That's good, thank you. Okay, now you have one more? I think we have time for one more.
Well, Two Little Girls in Blue, I think was always a favorite. I know as a child I loved for Daddy to sing that to me. They rocked me to sleep with that. Come listen, my lad, to a story I'll tell, a story that's strange but true. Your father and I in school one day met two little girls in blue. Two little girls in blue, lad. Two little girls in blue. They were sisters and we were brothers, and learned to love them too. Oh, one little girl in blue, lad, who won your father's heart, became your mother. I married the other, but we have drifted apart. The picture of one of those girls, my lad, to me she was once a wife. I found her unfaithful, we quarreled, lad, and parted that night for life. Two little girls in blue, lad, two little girls in blue. They were sisters and we were brothers, and learned to love them too. Oh, one little girl in blue, lad, who won your father's heart, became your mother. I married the other, but we have drifted apart.
Oh, I'm sure you have good memories of that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, rocking you to sleep with that. It
right.
sounds like a good lullaby, except for the last part of it.
Yeah. Oh, it was sad, and I wondered.
Yeah. But it makes a good tune for a lullaby. Okay, now we have one more, and that's about the hat. The hats.
Oh,
If you'll
okay.
sing that one, and then we're going to take some pictures of your mother and dad when they were young. I want to see if I can get that on this film.
Okay, I hope you can, because
Yeah.
that one picture, I mean, they look like silent film stars.
Yes, okay.
It's just a terrific picture.
Okay.
And also, if you can, to get a picture of their awards.
His
that
wall
they
in
won
there,
on the
absolutely.
wall.
Yes, I'd like to do that.
Okay, I think I know the words to this, but I want to
Well, it's always good to have
make
it.
sure. That's the Battleship the Maine and the Weeping Willow Tree, all these. Here it is.
This is
Now, this is a song that Mrs. Thompson, Miss D. Thompson, knew too, and every year they would have a birthday party for Daddy and Miss Thompson, and they would sing this song. So this brings back memories of that.
Okay, and before you sing it now, the birthday is on July.
The 25th.
And they're both, that's their birthday. Both
Right.
And
so they'd always celebrate. Of course, they weren't born the same year.
No, Miss D, I think, just turned 94.
Yeah,
and
Daddy was born in 1899.
Okay.
At 21, I thought I would to my sweetheart get married. The people in the neighborhood had said too long we'd tarried. So quickly to the church we went, expecting to get wed. No sooner had we got there than the parson to me said, "Where did you get that hat? Where did you get that tie? Oh, isn't it a lovely one? It's just the proper style. Oh, I would love to have one just the same as that. Where'er I go they shout, 'Hello, where'd you get that hat?' If we should go to the Opry House in the opera season, someone there'd be sure to laugh without the slightest reason. If we should go to the dancing hall to have a little spree, someone in the parlor there'd be sure to shout at me, 'Where did you get that hat? Where did you get that tie? Oh, isn't it a lovely one? It's just the proper style. Oh, I would love to have one just the same as that. Where'er I go they shout, 'Hello, where'd you get that hat?'"
Oh, well, I see you got some of your mom and dad's talent. Yep, you followed right in their footsteps. Well, thank you, Mary Frazier. We have really enjoyed this interview. It's been wonderful. And I'm going to now get you to get me the picture, bring the picture over here, if you will, and we'll see if we can make a copy of it.
All right.
Okay, let me get her focused right here on it.
This one.
I've got one over here. Yeah, there we go. Right there. That is great. Okay, now you've got one on another page?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yes. That is good. Let me see. I'm going to try something. Okay. All right, that's good.
Okay. Lighting is not very good in here.
I'm going to get as much as I can of it. Okay. Get your dad up here at the Old Burying Grounds gate on Ann Street. That's good. North Carolina Folklore Society Brian Hudson Folklore Award. And then he has a Town of Beaufort Citizens Award.
Yeah, we had the key to the city up here. I don't know what happened to that. He was presented that.
This was in March 1993. And this was presented to Mary Clark Paul. Okay. And then in 1981, an appreciation and recognition, commendable services and noteworthy achievement in the community. This honor plaque is presented to outstanding citizen Graydon Muir Paul, Woodman of the World Life Insurance Society, 1981. Well, isn't that nice?
The way Daddy got that middle name, Muir, his mother liked an English author whose name was John Muir, so she gave Daddy the middle name of Muir.
We all have a reason.